Hello and welcome to the latest in the Leaders with Ambition podcast series. And today I am absolutely delighted to welcome my guest, William Washington III. And William is the global CFO of Baker McKenzie. And I am telling you, it is going to be an absolutely fascinating story today. William's going to share and bringing his career journey to life for us, which I think people will probably expect just this very smooth trajectory up to the senior role he is today. But there have been lots of challenges along the way, which William will share with us today. And also the amount of perseverance and hard work that's gone into developing William's career and how much he's given back. So he's a great believer in paying it forward, but also, as he says, paying it back, which really resonated with me. And along the way, the impact that an executive coach had on his career in really helping him to take that big jump into the CFO role. And you'll hear today that William is incredibly authentic. He also is one of those people that really brings his true self to all aspects of his life. And the executive coach also helped him to realize that sometimes you do have to show a bit of vulnerability in the workplace. And that's when his career really did take off. So we'll touch on networking, we'll touch on allyship, we'll touch on mentoring, lots of things that we'll bring to life today. But William, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you to bring your career history to life for us.
Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to be on the podcast. And thank you for sharing that story about my career. Sometimes, even when I listen to it, it still sends chills down my spine.
Yeah.
Like you said, I'm William Washington. I'm the global CFO at Baker McKenzie, one of the largest law firms in the world, if not the largest law firm in the world. We do over $3.5 billion in revenue every year, and we're located in 46 different countries. And I'm very fortunate to be sitting here in this seat today and to be saying that I'm their chief financial officer. Like you said, the journey wasn't straight and smooth, and it wasn't until I sat in this seat that people started asking me about my career journey. Yeah. But for me, my story is something that's real. It is authentic. It's something I lived. It's a part of me. And I'm always happy to pay it forward and to share with others kind of the path that I took to get here.
And I think that's really powerful, isn't it, as well? Because I think when you share your story, people will it'll resonate with people that you do have to really be intentional in what you're doing in life, don't you? So if you don't mind sharing your career with us, or your journey with us, that would be amazing.
Yeah, no, I'm always hoping that there's just one person who's sitting in a seat listening to this podcast who wants and is eager to move forward in their career and doesn't know quite the next step to take. I think that the world needs everybody. Yeah. We need the Nickies of the world, the Williams of the world, the whoever is out there listening. The world needs you and your skill set. And it's just really about navigating your own career journey. And for me, I didn't necessarily have a guiding light or a path that I saw that was super clear. Like you said, my journey started, I say I started as a non-traditional student back to my college days, where my formative years had been full of ups and downs. I grew up in a home that just had a lot going on, I would say, and it wasn't very clear kind of what steps I needed to take in order to navigate life. And I remember early on, I was working in the mailroom of a law firm, actually. And I didn't know if I wanted to be a truck driver. I didn't know if I wanted to work at a shoe store. I didn't know if I wanted to be a FedEx delivery person, but really what I knew was I wanted more out of life. And I was fortunate that in college, I was able to find an amnesty program that gave me an opportunity to go to school. I was able to, as a single parent, find housing and an opportunity to start my career. And I say I majored in finance really because money was the one thing that I didn't have and I didn't know about. And I figured if I studied it, that it just might unlock some doors and kind of show me a pathway that was different than a path I had seen early on. And so that really started my career journey.
And you say that, and it sounds like it was relatively easy. Now, that will have been really hard, particularly as a single parent. As you say, holding down numerous jobs, going to get your college degree. I mean, how much real focus and determination did you have at that time then? Was it inherent in you, or did you think it was the right thing to do raising your child?
Well, really, for people who are in situations that seem hopeless, and there's a lot of situations that make people feel hopeless. And I tell people, I was raised, early on by a single parent. I became a single parent. I had tragedy that hit my home early. I had a sister who was murdered, unfortunately, and I had a brother who committed suicide. In my home, there was abuse that was around, and whether you're going through abuse, whether you're being raised in a single parent household, whether there's things happening in your childhood, it really puts you in a box and makes you your only hope is to get out of the box, right? And when you're sitting in that box, it feels like a really dark place and you're willing to do anything to get out of it. And unfortunately, most people are showing ways out of it that aren't necessarily a lit path to global CFO,
Yeah.
and back when I was growing up, for Black men in America, that pathway seemed like dealing drugs or committing crimes or anything that would put money in your pocket immediately seemed like a solution. And the hardest thing to do seemed like going back to school as a single parent. Like that almost seemed impossible. And it wasn't just to turn the key and open the door. You really need a series of events to happen for opportunity to find that person who finds himself in what seems like a hopeless situation. But the good news, Nikki, is most situations aren't hopeless.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of programs and opportunities. And the one I named for my university, the amnesty program that they had, the housing that they had for single parents, that was just one opportunity out of many that probably exist. And it's really about finding that opportunity. And was I lucky? Was it serendipity? Was it a spiritual force? I think it's all of that. But really think that the message and key takeaway for people is to never give up and look for that opportunity, because there are so many programs and so many people that want to help people get on the pathway to success.
It's finding those, isn't it, that sometimes can be the challenging thing. And I think you mentioned to me when we spoke previously that when you had got your college degree, you had gone to the university and happened to be sat next to a very senior finance person at the dinner. And that subsequently led to you starting the next stage in your career, didn't it?
Yeah, I tell people you have to almost match perseverance and hard work to opportunity. So when I went back to university, I didn't think I was smart enough. I didn't think I was capable. But what I did know was I was hungry and I had a kid to feed. And so that gave me the focus to sit in the library for 3 hours a day, to get my schoolwork done, to turn in every homework assignment, to take every test as if it was the last. And that put me in a situation where I became one of the top students in the university. And as a top student, I was invited to this dinner with some of the donors in the university. And one of the donors happened to be a CEO of the largest cottonseed company in the world. And that CEO had a conversation with me at dinner. And that led to him offering me a position and a role at their firm. At the time, I thought I had hit the jackpot, right? I tell people they were paying me 20-something thousand dollars a year. My title was international financial analyst. I was living in Scott, Mississippi, a relatively small town. But when I drove up to that office on day one, you couldn't have told me I wasn't the CEO or I wasn't a big leader or I wasn't about to do big things, because really what it presented for me was that hope and that light that we were talking about
Yeah.
earlier.
I love that. And you really did work hard then, didn't you, as well? This was something that you committed to, which I think is something that everybody can take note of. It's about how much you put into opportunities.
Yeah, when I get an opportunity, what I want to do is not give 100%. I want to give 110%. And whether it was in school or that first job, I immediately started a habit that I've carried with me today, where I woke up early in the morning. And I remember driving down a long road to Scott, Mississippi to the office and just making sure I was the first one in the office, making sure I developed the skill sets that they needed to do the job. And it wasn't like I came in day one and everyone patted me on the back and said, "You're the greatest ever, and we're so glad we hired you." I really just had to keep putting one foot in front of the other and working every day and putting that same work effort that I put into raising my son and getting through school and working in a mailroom and all those other things that I did earlier in life, I really just put them to practice in a business atmosphere. And of course, you have to make sure you get dressed for the job. I see so
Yes.
many people that get an opportunity, but they bring their old self into the new opportunity. And I really looked around to my left and right and tried to make sure that came to work that I represented the person that they thought they were getting when they hired me, and also the person I wanted to be in the future.
Yeah.
So I immediately started picking models that I would follow, and I've done that throughout my career as well.
I love that. And I love the fact that, you are obviously incredibly excited about this opportunity. And as you say, you're thinking, oh my God, this is amazing. But you're still thinking about your longer term career path, aren't you? And again, you quite early on in your career decided that there was going to be a goal for you and you were aiming for that goal. And so you were intentional about your next career move, weren't you?
Yes, yes. When you come in from a dark place, the one thing you want to do is try to put as much distance behind what's behind you by moving as far forward as you can forward. And so I recently I did a podcast during COVID, and I remember my wife kept saying, "What are you going to name it?" And I kept coming back to the same name. I was like, intense intentionality, intense intentionality.
I
And
like that.
she's like, no, that sounds terrible. I don't like it. I said that's what one thing that's been consistent is being very, very intentional about
Yeah.
every decision, every choice, every hour of the day, and making sure I find the tools that I need in order to manifest what it is I'm trying to do. And one of the books that I read early on, Steve Covey's Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. I read that in college, and I tell people having seven things to focus on really helped me to focus and build the habits I needed to be successful in my career.
I love that. I love that. Again, you're focusing on your personal development and growth as well as your professional, aren't you? Which is incredibly, but I know both are incredibly important to you, aren't they? To
Yes,
go
yes,
hand
you
in
have to
hand.
bring them together.
Yeah. To show that authenticity again. Otherwise it's not real. It's not real, is it? So you moved on to your next role. And again, you had a career promotion with that as well and a title promotion. Were you then starting to think, I'm getting closer to my end goal, or were you still really trying to do the best job you possibly could in that current situation?
Well, the good thing about my career is I was able to see what the levels were that were needed, right? I knew even early on after I took that first job, I started to work. I took a job at Accenture where it was very clear. You start as an analyst, you work the specialist, specialist work the manager, manager works the director. And there were general timelines that they gave around that. And so I knew I started to see the step ladder. Although as I looked up, I didn't see people who looked like me or had my background. So although I knew what the steps were, I still didn't have that hope to believe that I could truly, truly achieve them. I was just grateful for every role that I was ever given.
Right.
And so what I would say is that I started working towards those next steps, but they never came easy, right? Like just moving from analyst to specialist, I saw some barriers. Moving from specialist to manager, I saw some barriers. But as I overcame those barriers, I started to develop confidence that, what are my superpower? What are my strengths? I may not be the smartest person in the room. I may not have a degree from the best university. I may not have had the background and pedigree that some other people had. But I found the things that were important to me, that I could have a work ethic that was super important. So I was always going to work hard, that I was always going to develop myself professionally. So I tell people I've always had a habit of trying to read 3 books a month. And I say one book is on professional development, Something to Sharpen the Saw from Steve Covey.
Yeah.
One book is on spiritual development. I always want to be grounded and balanced spiritually, whatever that may be, whether it's the Bible or whether it's a book on meditation, and then the last one is always read a book for fun, because, if you keep reading and it's boring and not entertaining, then you're not going to keep reading. And we know that reading develops your vocabulary, your knowledge, and other things. So even reading a book for fun can help you develop. And I found by building these habits in the background that when those opportunities came for promotion, again, I was doing the work in the background so that the opportunity could meet the preparation. And so even though it never came when I wanted, looking back, I can tell you now that getting to manager, director, and those other levels did come at the time that was right for me.
Yeah. Well, at the time, it sometimes feels it's too slow. It's all not moving quickly enough, doesn't it? Like you say, but it's reflection that makes that so important. It's to really
Absolutely.
see where you've got to and what you're doing. So, as you say, you get to director and you're ready. You feel you're ready for the CFO role. And that's when you had the impact of the executive coach in your life, wasn't it?
Yeah, because you could almost say that moment was like a red alert, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like I'm director and I'm doing those things. I'm reading the books. I'm getting in early. I know more than I've ever known about finance, but yet my phone's not ringing or the interviews aren't landing me a job as CFO. And I looked at myself and I said, what's the problem? My resume looks great. I've worked hard. Why aren't these opportunities coming? Are they never going to come? And so I hired an executive coach, and there were a lot of events that kind of exposed me to the fact that executive coaches even existed, because I can't say that I even knew that existed. There's a lot of things that pointed me to the fact that I needed one. And really, I had to be proactive and take the action to actually look for one. And I had two choices. One was this Black man who had achieved a lot in his career and decided to become an executive coach. And the other man was, and I always hate to describe him on a podcast, but he was not like the first man. And I'm not quite, I honestly think the only reason I went with him was because of the name of his organization. It was called K Street Coaching. I worked on K Street. K Street in DC was known as a place of success and whatever. I think I just said the name was going to be that. And when he showed up, he was completely opposite than what I expected. But he did a few things that really changed my life and changed my career. First and foremost was he had an approach about him that was very thoughtful, kind, and considerate, which I needed. He almost became a friend in some ways and definitely a mentor. The other thing he did was he did a 360-degree feedback, which are very common. People do them all the time. Matter of fact, I have some to do for people at work today, but what that 360 said about me was like looking in a mirror, but seeing the backside of me. So we always see what's in front of us, but I had never really seen the backside. And you started off by saying I'm very authentic and I share my story and I'm vulnerable. And it turned out that the early part of my career, I wasn't showing that authenticity and vulnerability at work because I was so driven to get the work done.
Yeah.
I would come in and just grind and tell people we got to grind. And I'd tell them the tasks that we need to do, but I never would tell them about William Washington and who I was. And really, that was, if I had to take away one thing that he taught me, he said, make sure people know who you are. Make sure your team knows who you are. And that'll open them up to work harder and work better for you. And I started coming into work, and I still do this today. I lead every meeting. I don't start off talking about the task or the agenda. I start every meeting saying, how are you doing today? And this is how I'm doing today. And oh, by the way, meet my family, and by being vulnerable and sharing more of myself, I've been able to become a better leader of people and have a better understanding of what drives them and what their needs are as well.
Do you think that's when you actually transitioned from management to leadership, or had you already started leading a little bit earlier than that?
Oh, I was probably put in a leadership position, but I probably wasn't leading in a way that people wanted to follow. Today, I believe, you're never going to get everybody, but I definitely have more people who want to go along for the ride with me. And I always say, if you can get your team, everyone rowing in the same direction, you can do more than going it alone. And I definitely know that the key to my success is my team, having a great team of people around me who have bought into the vision and the strategy, who have bought into me not only as a leader, but as a person. And when that team and they buy into each other as well, right? Yeah. Like that vulnerability and authenticity is not something I demand of myself, but I also ask that of my team. And so they've bonded with each other, and now we're more of a team. And that's when I got uplifted from director to CFO. And it almost happened successfully. It was almost, if you wanted a key to a door, I had been working with that executive coach for exactly 12 months. We had exactly hit a milestone in our working relationship to when I got that first opportunity as a CFO. And I'd give a lot of credit to Gideon Coleman, is his name, for helping me to get there.
I love that. I love the fact that you invested in yourself as well to achieve this and recognize that you needed extra help and support. But I also love it's 12 months. I mean, that's pretty magic. There you go. There's your key.
Yes. It's almost like a dream come true in a lot of ways. And if you go back to the early parts of my story where I said, I had all those challenges in my childhood. I had challenges, with school and in my personal life, trying to be a single parent. I had dark places with family members who when their life ended, it really started making me think about my life ending. And coming from that dark place in that box to now these great opportunities coming my way, I just can look back and connect the dots and say, you know what? No one wants to be in a dark place, but being in those dark places also helped me. It helped me to build perseverance. It helped me to build empathy towards others. It helped me to become a better worker because I'm so grateful for every opportunity that I get. And now I can't imagine my life not having started with that adversity. Yeah. And not having had adversity along the way to keep me reminded of where I came from.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly powerful, actually. And when you were recognizing now that you're a CFO, were you able to reflect and say, I've achieved? Or were you thinking now I've got more that I want to go for and want to grow because I know that I can actually help other people and pay it forward?
Yeah, Nikki, look, I think to myself that we all wake up every day with another 24 hours if we're lucky. Yeah. And I count myself as the lucky one to wake up with another 24 hours. And so, yes, there's more to achieve and more to get done. Similar to the work that I did with the executive coach, I still have a backside that needs to be developed. I still have work to do. The world still needs leadership in a lot of different areas. And I feel like if I'm given another 24 hours and I continue to grow, that there's still more to achieve. And it's not titles or status or even money, because now I don't wake up hungry for food every day. But I wake up for that hunger to have an impact, to make a difference, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's with my family, or whether it's just in the world in general. And I believe that's why I started off saying the world needs everybody. Nobody wants to go out here and walk the earth alone, right? We want to work in environments where we're contributing to the greater good. And that's why I give back. That's why I try to pay it forward. And that's why there's still more work to be done.
Yeah, and you mentioned you had no role models when you were growing up in the work-based environment. Is that also one of the reasons why you feel that you do need to really, as you mentioned, pay it forward and pay it back and mentor and coach and develop? Do you feel that you not only want to do it, but that there's a need there for you to do it as well?
Yeah, I don't take it for granted that I'm an African American CFO. And someone else may have a different profile, but I'm an African American CFO who came from a lot of adversity. And I believe that someone out there is looking up and looking for their North Star, or looking for their role model. And it's a big responsibility, because I almost have to sometimes take on the weight of somebody who's back in the same position that I was in. But I also see it as a great opportunity and a blessing to be sitting in this seat and to show them a North Star or hope that they otherwise wouldn't have, because that's what I was looking for. And a lot of times, most of my career, I'd say I looked up. I either, one, didn't see someone who looked like me, or two, that person was either unapproachable, unattainable, or I had no idea how they got to where they got. And to me, we missed so many opportunities by not giving back and not opening our door to share our story with other people. And I just feel like if I woke up today and took another breath, it's another opportunity to give back. And as long as I have breath and as long as I have energy, I'm going to first do my job and focus on my priorities and make sure that the firm that has given me this opportunity gets that 110%. And then I'm going to take my other 110% and try to help out others.
And you do a lot of work in the community as well, don't you? I know you've mentioned to me, you and your family work in the community, and you do feel that, again, there's this is part of what we all should be doing.
Yeah, well, our community starts with our family, right? And it saddens me when I hear, a young person say that either their father has passed away or is not available. And I feel like being a father is my first community, and I want to be there to cheer my kids on, to give them opportunities, and to just give them a hug, to be present. And then I just start extending community from there, right? Who are the people in my inner circle who are closest to me? Who are people who are a single parent now, who are having struggles in school, who are having struggles in their career? And I believe that making myself available for them, whether it's through structured programs, which I do a lot. I go to events where I speak to prisoners. I go to events where I speak to schools. I try to be involved at every university, every school I've ever attended. I try to go back and give back. And then there's just young professionals who connect with me on LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn a lot to both share my story, but also to make myself available to reach out to others. And I try to post things that connect with people, that they can read something in my post that helps them to see the path that I took, and that might help them understand how to navigate their own careers. So yeah, giving back to me it's almost a 24/7 job in and of itself.
Yeah.
But giving back gives me 10 times more than I ever put out.
I love that. And I love also the fact, you talk about anyone listening to this now will all say, how has he got enough time in the day to do any of this stuff? But I know that you also are very intentional about how you spend your time, and you do get up early and you make sure that you prepare yourself in the best way possible for the day so that you could bring your real true self to work, don't
Yeah,
you?
I think you have to know what your priorities are. And, people hear me tell the story. I get up at 5 a.m. or earlier every morning. I try to start my morning off with meditation, yoga, or exercise to get my balance right. I try to prepare for work for a couple hours before the workday actually officially starts. And how do I do all of that and still like spend time with family, get my work done, do other things? And I think you just have to prioritize. Do I watch TV? Yes. Do I watch it incessantly? Absolutely not. How do I find time to read a book? I make sure that I have both audio books and hard books so that I can listen to audio books when I'm not driving, but I'm commuting somewhere.
Mm.
I can read hard books when I'm on a plane or in my bed. And you have to decide first and foremost what you want out of life. Not what I want for you out of life. You have to decide what you want out of life. And most people want financial security, housing security, food security. And if you wake up with two arms and two legs, or even if you don't, and a breath, then you have the opportunity to decide how you're going to spend the 24 hours of your life. And sleep is also an important
Very
component.
important for you. Yeah.
And so I tend to go to bed by 8 or 9 every night, because staying up to 10 or 11 or midnight just doesn't do anything for me.
Not
I
you
say
get up at
people,
5 a.m.
yeah, I tell people when the sun goes down, it's time for William to go down. When the sun comes up or before the sun comes up, it's time for me to get up. And that works for me in my schedule.
I love that. That's really positive, isn't it? You decide to move to Hogan Lovells, which again is a really big step up. What was the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, I think when I made that move, that was when I was working with the coach. When we got to that 12-month mark, I was a director at another law firm, and I got this opportunity to be the CFO at Hogan Lovells. And again, I'll never forget sitting at the table and being, basically interviewed, but I could tell the momentum was going in the right direction. And it almost put me back in that same seat of when I was in college and someone was offering me the opportunity of a lifetime. And I think that that's what that represented to me. There's a show in the U.S. called The Jeffersons,
Yeah.
where George Jefferson and Wheezy always dance in the kitchen about moving on up. And I say that when I got that opportunity, me and my wife danced in the kitchen to the Jefferson song. And were we grateful? Yes, it was a great opportunity. Had I worked hard to get there? Yes, I worked hard to get there. Did I feel like I belonged at the table? I think that you always have this nagging sense in the background of how to really bring your whole self into that situation. But that work I had done with the executive coach had really prepared me to understand what my strengths were and what my weaknesses were and how important it is to have a good team around you.
Yeah.
And so I had the opportunity early on at Hogan Lovells to build my team, and I put good people around me. And I think that that really continues to this day to be one of my secrets to success.
Yeah. And empowering people, as you mentioned earlier, is incredibly important, isn't it? To enable people to reach their true potential as well.
Yeah, because we've all had good leaders and leaders that are not so good. And everyone has a different work style, different things that they bring to the table. And one of the things we did during that work with the executive coach was I remember specifically him giving me like a packet of communication styles for each one of my team members.
Ah,
And really, the easiest takeaway for someone listening to this to understand is just how I start each meeting with each of them during their one-on-ones needed to be different based on who they were. Some people are more touchy-feely. Some people want to get right to the point. Some people are talkative. Some people are listeners. And that's just simplifying it. Like I said,
yeah.
it was a packet of information. And really, again, it goes back to understanding that people are people. They need to be in a position to bring their whole self to work in order for you to get the best out of them. To me, poor leadership is when you put people in a box, you micromanage them, you don't empower them. It's not how I want to be handled. And I don't think many people on my team want to be handled that same way.
Well, I think you're completely right there. You've hit the nail on the head. Treat people how you want to be treated. I think
Absolutely.
it's the way forward, isn't it?
Absolutely. One of the biggest tests of am I achieving what I want to achieve is doing things like this, right? Because my team members and other people will see this,
Yeah.
and I use the example. I was doing a town hall with my big team in the Philippines a couple of weeks ago, and they asked me about some of my career journey, my secrets to success, and I talked to them about getting up. And then my daughter came and she was traveling with me and she came into the room and I said, feel free to ask her anything. And they asked her a question. They said, what's he like in the morning or something like that? And she said, well, he gets up at 5 a.m. and he thinks he's walking around quietly, but he makes a lot of noise and he goes to the gym and he comes back. And sometimes I go with him. And so,
I
and
love
just her,
it.
yeah, just her almost drawing the same picture of me
Yeah.
that I had already drawn to them just reinforced that it's so important, not what you say,
Yeah.
but what you do,
Actions.
because people are always watching.
Yeah.
And, my daughter sharing what she was watching out the corner of her eye from her bed was just another great example of that.
I love that. I love that she lets you get away with being noisy at 5 a.m. I don't think my daughter would let me.
Yeah, you try to be quiet, but at the end of the day, you're waking people up.
If I'm trying to be quiet, I think you're noisy. I think it's one of those things, isn't it? And then talking about obviously Baker McKenzie, where you are now, that when you stepped up into the global CFO role at Baker McKenzie, again, was it a moment of you just really reflecting on what you've achieved in your career? How did it feel?
Well, again, you talk about is this the end? And in some sense, it was another achievement in my career, not the end, but what defined the last role versus this role is at Hogan, I was the regional CFO for the Americas or North America. And now it's the global CFO, which meant every decision I made is basically the final decision when it comes to finances. And that was something I really wanted because you work really hard to make decisions and make recommendations. But until your butt's on the line,
Yeah.
you really aren't at risk. And I felt like I wanted to use my experience and knowledge and have my butt on the line to be that decision maker who has to live or die with what I decide. Again, I can't do it unless I have a good team helping me to make that decision. But the responsibility and the ownership really rests with me. And it wasn't the title or the status that was appealing to me when I made this achievement. It was that responsibility that I really wanted. And so that was kind of a pivotal moment in my career.
I love that. And I love the fact that, these are big decisions you're making as well, for them, as you say, a huge global law firm. So not for the faint-hearted, William, I would say.
It's not, but you know what? Because of my background, I also know that every decision isn't life or death either.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
when I'm in a room, hopefully my presence is a calming presence because there's nothing new under the sun. We're not doing brain surgery or trying to cure cancer. And when you come at it with that perspective, but also understand the importance of your decisions, then you can create a balanced approach. And that goes back to being prepared, reading a book about your profession, being prepared, reading a book about your spirituality so you can be balanced. And also being lighthearted enough to know that there's nothing so consequential that you can't make another decision right after that to rebound from.
I love that. Do you think someone in your position, having, had to go back to college and to university later on in life, not at the normal time that people do, would people be able to do that these days? Is it more challenging now? Because I think there seem to be more hoops people have to jump through all the times with their careers these days.
I actually think today there's more opportunity. And that's why I love talking to young people. I say they live in a generation where they have access to information unlike any other generation before them. And so for me, finding that university and that opportunity was a needle in a haystack. I mean, was it going to open a newspaper and it was going to tell me about it? There wasn't the internet. And there wasn't no one was going to call me in those dark places that I was sitting in. But today, anyone can walk into a library, have access to the whole world in terms of the internet. But the most important thing I tell people to look at is you can always find a podcast like this or use LinkedIn to see someone's career path in order to build that personal map for yourself. And in the past, you used to have to read like someone's biography, a big, thick book in order to figure out. And then you had to read a bunch of them if you wanted that type of knowledge. Today, you can go to Wikipedia, you can go to Google, and you can learn things about people's path. But then you have to put into action those things that they did. When I tell you that I went back to school, I did not just show up. I showed up and tried to show out. I did the work that was asked of me. I woke up every day at 7 and went to class from 7 to noon. I went to the library every day from 12 to 3, whether I had homework, whether I had a test, whether I had any requirements. I made sure that I showed up in the library every single day from 12 to 3. And then I played basketball almost every day from 3 to 5. And then I would pick my son up at 5 and go home and start the whole routine over again. And it was that rigor that I put in that allowed me to get basically all A's when I was in college. And if you want to go to college and be a B or C student, just take one of those things out.
Yeah.
But if you want to be a student that performs and you know yourself, building some type of rigor is one of the steps that I took that helped me to get started on my journey. And that was just to get to the starting point.
Yeah.
So if you're playing a board game, that's just to get to square one.
Go.
And then you have to be able to ride the rest of the chutes and ladders up and down.
Yeah.
And build healthy habits that support that.
Yeah, and I think you've hit the nail on the head really. Routine and building a productive, healthy habit routine if you're trying to do anything. And sometimes you just have to put one step in front of the other to start learning to run and to run a race, don't you? This doesn't happen
Yeah.
overnight.
Sometimes my kids look at me and I say, well, you know the steps I took, and they
Yeah.
say, well, Dad, you had a kid when you were in college and that's why you did everything you did. I say, well, you better start pretending like you have a kid. Something you're doing isn't working and if you
Change it
want,
up.
yeah, find something to motivate you, something that drives you. Use that life experience to propel you to want more and to do more, or don't. And
Again,
one
it's
of
a
the
choice, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
and one of the stories I tell my kids all the time, I say, when I got that second chance to go to university, it wasn't just a second chance for me. I actually brought my cousin, who was the same age as me, down at university at the same time. And he was coming back as an older student without a kid. And he made choices and I made choices. And his life went down a path and my life went down a path. He's happy and I'm happy. We just have two different lives.
Yeah.
And I always tell my kids, you can have his life or you can have my life or something in between. But you can see very clearly that he didn't end up getting the degree. He didn't end up graduating. He didn't end up, having a foundation and a job opportunity. And I did. And it wasn't because I was special. It was literally just taking and putting one foot in front of the other.
Working hard. And you and I have talked about DI and the importance of that in your life as well, and particularly around allyship. And I think that's one of the biggest things, isn't it? Is about how we are supporting one another in any kind of capacity.
Yeah, and inclusion is a dirty word in North America right
Yeah.
now. And to me, it's never going to be a dirty word. I think that the world is beautiful because of the diversity that exists within it. And whether it's male or female, black or white, or some other underrepresented group. And trust me, one of the reasons I believe in diversity, equity, inclusion is because even I have been learned about other underrepresented groups when I've been in service. And so now I'm more thoughtful about when I schedule meetings. Because guess what? All holidays don't roll around the
Yeah.
Christian Judeo calendar. I'm more thoughtful about people with mental health, neurodiversity, or other challenges in their life. I'm more thoughtful about people who just probably have an elder parent at home and providing opportunities, not just for them. It's not about them. Us getting their services and getting the best out of them helps us. And so I find creating inclusive environments, whether it's through programs, remote work, hybrid work, or just empathy, creates a better workforce and a stronger workforce.
Yeah, and you have got such diversity in Baker McKenzie because you're a global organization. So, by the nature of the beast, there are lots of different kinds of belief systems happening.
Yeah, I had an opportunity one time to address our executive committee, and we were telling stories about each one of us had to present on the legacy we wanted to leave. And they sat us in a chair and they had us speaking to the whole executive committee. And I looked up there and I saw black and white and Asian. I saw women and men. I saw gay people and straight people. I saw people who had challenges early in life and people who hadn't. And I stood up there to tell my story. And the very first thing I did was I cried.
Wow. It was just so powerful.
And it was just such a powerful moment for me, not just to look at the diversity that was sitting in front of me, but to even think that someone would ask me, William Washington, this guy who was sitting in his box early, about legacy. Like,
Yeah.
like that's the opposite end. I was at survival. And now we're talking about legacy. And I cried and I stopped and they went to something else and they came back to me and they gave me a chance to breathe and think. And I cried again. And I said, I'm just going to sit here and cry because it's how I feel and it's how I'm showing up today. And I was received well. And I was like almost the last person to go. When the last person went, they cried, And I said, you know what? Even that's a method of diversity and
Yeah,
being vulnerable and being authentic. Sometimes you just have to cry, and it's okay. I don't cry every day. I'm very strong and motivated and hardworking, but I also cry sometimes. And so, again, I didn't feel earlier in my career that there was room for that. I
right.
wouldn't even tell people I was a single parent. I wouldn't even tell people I went to school as a non-traditional student. There was so long in my career, I pushed all that to the side and just came into work. And it's only when I started bringing that whole self to work that people started seeing that authenticity, that integrity, that in the person that I truly am. And that's when my career and opportunities started, blossoming.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing advice as well, isn't it? And I think, as you say, that always thinking about bringing your best true self to work. Why would you want anything else there? It'd be
Yeah.
hard pretending. It's hard pretending, isn't it? And what would you say are the biggest challenges facing global CFOs like yourself at the moment? Because there's a lot going on out there, isn't there?
Yeah, well, I'm fortunate to live in North America where the geopolitical landscape and the financial markets and a lot of other things have been impacting the market. And people always ask me, how do you deal with it? How do you deal with what's going on with the presidential election? And I say, well, I operate in 46 different countries, and across 46 different countries, 70% of them had elections last year.
Yeah,
And guess what? A lot of those countries have issues that are well beyond what's happening in North America. And to me, that's what excites me about the job is learning how to navigate through complexities and come up with solutions and decisions that keep the business afloat. And I often tell our leadership, this is just part of my lived experience. And I'm so grateful and thankful for it. I tell the leaders at my firm, this is the only time that we will collectively be leading together. This is in this year, 2025 is the only time the leadership team will have my name, your name, and the name of the person next to you. And what we do today matters. It doesn't matter what the leadership team did 5, 10 years ago. It doesn't matter what the future, because there'll be no future if we don't lead properly. It only matters what we do today and how are we going to show up and how are we going to work together and collaborate to navigate the challenges. And I play a role in that. And I own that role as a global CFO. So I get excited about the opportunity that I have to leave the firm better than I found it, to do the best I can to keep the momentum going. We have a rich history at our firm, and I want to honor that history while honoring my own personal history in order to make the firm and leave it in a better place than it was when I got here.
I love that. That's definitely something I think will resonate with people. And you've given loads of takeaways throughout the podcast today, but what would be your final words of wisdom? Thinking maybe William when he was working in a law firm, but it was in the post room, to now being the global CFO of one of the largest law firms in the world. What would your words of wisdom be for people?
Look, the same words of wisdom that I heard when I was working in the mailroom, and there was this old woman who was retiring from the kitchen work, and all she ever did was go around and replace all the coffee in a coffee machine. And everyone knew her, everyone loved her, everyone respected her. And when she was retiring, she had this old Caribbean accent, and I don't want to repeat it because I'll embarrass myself to try to mimic a Caribbean accent. But she said her mother taught her early on that no matter what job you're given to do, make sure you do it to your fullest and you give 110%. And she said, I tried to bring that to work every single day. And she didn't belittle her role as the coffee person who changed the coffee in the machines. She just said, I had a role to play and I gave it 110%. And I remember that speech more than I remember many other speeches I've heard throughout my life since then. And I've tried to do that whether I was a student in university, whether I was an analyst in Scott, Mississippi, or whether I'm the global CFO at the largest law firm in the world. I'm going to come in today and give 110% and do my best to leave this place better than I found it. And I think if you do that in whatever role or situation you find yourself in, you'll leave this earth feeling like you've had success.
I love that. What powerful words to finish on. William, I have to say, it's been an absolutely fascinating conversation with you today. I really appreciate it. And I know that lots of people are going to be listening and taking your advice on board. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity. If anybody's listening, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I think it's a great platform for sharing information and continuing to stay in touch.
Brilliant. Thank you.